Okay, let's get started then. All right. Hi, welcome everyone. So, thank you all for joining today. My name is Julie, and I'm the organizer for this event and one of the executives of the Software Systems Student Society. Here with us today is Jeffrey Leung, an SFU alumni in computer science and currently a software developer at Meta. So, Jeffrey will share his experiences and provide valuable insights into the co-op application process, discussing key projects, interview preparation, and LeetCode problem-solving strategies. Throughout the presentation, I'm sure you guys will have questions for Jeffrey, but don't worry, he'll answer them during the Q&A section at the end of his talk. Please note that the Zoom chat is disabled and that questions should only be sent in the Q&A section. If you want to unmute yourselves and ask Jeffrey a live question, please mention that in the Q&A section, and I'll call on you during the Q&A session. Lastly, please remember to keep your mics muted throughout the presentation. Now, everyone, let's welcome Jeffrey for his amazing presentation. So, Jeffrey, can you briefly describe your background?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Julie. Hey, everyone. My name is Jeffrey. I started at SFU in 2014. I graduated in 2021. That's 7 years if you do the math, all in undergrad. And I was in software systems. So I spent a lot of my time doing projects, hackathons, co-ops. I did a couple co-ops on back-end development, on payment systems, and then one at as a technical project coordinator. When I graduated in 2021, I started work at Amazon, working on Amazon Alexa smart home systems. But recently, I've moved down to San Francisco to start work at Meta on the network infrastructure team. So a lot of different things there, and excited to talk about my experience.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Jeffrey. That's quite the journey already. So, could you tell us about like your current role and what is a typical day like working at Meta?
Sure. So I'm currently a software engineer on the network infrastructure team. A quick background. There's a lot of different servers running a lot of different programs at Facebook and Meta and all the different pieces there. They pass data back and forth, they pass requests. And because there's so much complexity, you have to link those servers in an efficient way. Otherwise, you're going to be getting your requests at very slow speed. You're going to take forever to load your Facebook wall, etc. So my team works on the switching and the routers required in order to connect all those servers and builds network topologies so that we can effectively have scale ups of a large amounts of units. So very, very weird abstract work and not something I thought I'd be doing as a student, but very fun regardless. So I'm still very new, but a typical day usually seems to look like um, getting into work around 9 and chatting with the teammates, figuring out what's new with the projects and the different initiatives going on. There's a lot of co-working happening, a lot of team meetings, although no specific stand-ups, right? We don't have like check-ins or stand-ups or anything like that, but we do have project-based. So if you need to meet with someone to discuss something, you meet with them. And so we have a couple of these meetings every day. Um, we meet with our manager once a week. But apart from that, it really is just kind of freedom to work at your own pace, follow the deadlines that you're given, and be accountable to yourself. So there's a lot of freedom in how you want to work effectively and efficiently. Um, so yeah.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Just as a follow-up question, what kinds of what tech stack are you using for your role, and what kind of
So
technologies? Yeah.
yeah, currently using C++. Um, It's very low level, and then we end up using a lot of Python scripts, Bash scripts, things like that. So there's a lot of hands-on kind of things. Um, Luckily, some of the larger companies have really complex pieces of infrastructure that will allow you to, do your development environment and deploy your code and build your things and test it with very little friction. right? So you don't always need to know the entire tech stack all the way up, right? So there's a lot of ways in which you or someone else has worked to abstract these pieces away and make it easier. But right now, C++.
Nice. So mainly back-end work?
Yeah, a little bit of back end, primarily device work. So a little bit of like memory management, CPU,
Um,
um, kind of abstract, still kind of learning.
yeah, that sounds great. And let's see. Right. For you said you have meetings very often. Is it like agile? What kind of methodology do you guys follow? Or is it very like flexible?
It's very flexible. A lot of the time you'll see teams using Kanban, Agile. Although these days I think Agile has changed a bit. It used to be um, Agile was all the ceremonies and pieces like that. Nowadays it's very flexible. You see a lot of teams sort of taking it and running it their own way. Doing meetings if they want to, but saying no, we don't need this retrospective meeting. We don't need that kind of other meeting. So very much an evolving sort of workflow there. Yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you so much. Yes. And for our next question, what inspired you to pursue a career in software development?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what kind of career I wanted back in high school. And I tried a couple different things and I was like, I don't really love biology. I don't really love this kind of area. And, I hate this kind of studying. But I used to play this game called Deus Ex, Human Revolution. And it's a little bit old now. I might be dating myself. But it's a game about a society where you can replace human limbs with cybernetic limbs, right? You can replace an arm with a stronger arm, a faster arm, a more capable arm, an arm with tools in it, an arm that can do a lot of different things. You can replace your eye with a stronger eye, an eye that can see UV, X-rays, a lot of different pieces there. And of course, it's a game. It's very fictional, and it heads into the direction of, uh, um, is it right to have these technologies? Is it okay to have these things if they're going to cost us, right? For example, is it okay to replace your human limbs actively if there's nothing wrong with it, right? Um, if it requires a drug from a company um, to keep that limb moving, then is it okay? What are the ethical concerns here? So there's a lot of different pieces about the society that's gotten strong enough to have these technologies. And although I don't love the negative ethical connotations, I love the fact that we can do so much with technology to make people's lives better. And that's the kind of like change I want to make, right? I want to empower people to do more and achieve more and build more things with technology because I think there's just so much left to build.
Wow. That's great to hear. That sounds very in-depth and very thoughtful reason why to pursue software development.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm very lucky. I think a lot of people stumble into it and some people are like, oh, I don't really know if this is the right thing for me, and I'm going to be honest, it sounds like a sure thing from the story I'm telling, but it only makes sense because I'm looking at it in retrospect, right? Like in the moment, all throughout university, I was doubting myself. I was thinking, I don't really know if this is the right path. I don't know if I'm doing the right things. I don't know if I'm building the right products if what I'm making is correct. But I've come out on the other side, understanding that it's a constant evolution. There's no one sure path. Um, and if you believe in something, then it's good to learn it and follow that path and see where it takes you.
yeah, I think our audience would also be relieved to know it's okay to not be too sure now, and that through by reflecting, one can be more sure too as well. So
Definitely.
everyone's journey is just very different. But yes. Okay, so on to our next question. Could you describe a few key projects you worked on that helped you land your work experiences?
Sure. Um, so Okay, so I'll go through a little bit of my work experiences so it makes a bit more sense. My first co-op was at Samsung as a backend software developer co-op. I worked on payment systems at the time. Um, And then my next co-op was at SAP as a technical project coordinator, working on a data dashboard, a visualization and analysis dashboard. At Amazon, I was working on smart home technology, um, starting on data engineering and then moving into C++ app development. And then here I am now as a software developer at Meta working on C++ network infrastructure. So if we go back at the beginning, um, I wanted to get into sort of like front end and back end at the very beginning. I wanted to see what that was like, and I did a couple of projects. I can't say they were the best projects; they really were not. What you guys are building these days is probably way better. But I ended up, working on some back end pieces. I learned a little bit of back end software development um, from a course that I took at SFU. And then I started to make my own projects out of it, a project that I created for the Comp Sci Student Society. Um, and because of that, I was more comfortable with pieces like testing and APIs, REST APIs, how a backend server works and what's the purpose of it. And so I was able to go into that interview going, this is what it's like, this is what it's about. I kind of understand what I know and what I don't know, right? Um, Being very aware of my limitations, but understanding that, I do have this a little bit of background on backends. I've built it, and this is the cool thing that I've built with it, and that kind of resonated with them, right? So that was number one. Um, Going into SAP was I was moving away from software, right? I was going into more of a technical project coordinator role. Um, I did a lot of student engagement at the time, and I found that it was really, really helpful for building soft skills and getting to know people and learning to speak and different organizational skills that you don't always get as a software developer, right? Um, so I kind of thought, hey, this is pretty fun. I know I'm doing tech, but maybe I could turn it into something else. So I went for technical project coordinator and cited a lot of my experience volunteering and running projects and leading teams. In retrospect, I only really needed like one or two good experiences. So, you don't have to go crazy on this one. But again, that resonated with them, and they said, hey, you know, I think you have the right soft skills and you're willing to learn, bring you on the team. Um, and then because I did a data analysis dashboard there, I started to look a little bit more into data as well. And then when I graduated Amazon, they placed me into the data engineering team at the smart home tech because I had, knowledge of working on that dashboard before. Um, so again, all of this is kind of tangential, right? You kind of have a little bit of connection, and you try and apply it and see what sticks, right? Um, and there were like 100 other things that I tried that didn't stick too, right? That's just kind of how it works. Um, so at Amazon, I kind of learned data engineering from scratch and kind of like built these different dashboards, built these pipelines. And then through a team change, I could put it into C++. I had never worked in C++ in production before. I had to learn. That's just kind of how it was, right? Team changes happen all the time. Um, and so when I came into Facebook, I was like, hey, I know C++. I can do a little bit, but I know nothing about networking. I don't know, I haven't done any networking courses. I barely know what layer 7 is, you know. But they said it's fine, you can learn, you have a little bit of background knowledge, and we're happy to teach you. Um, so that's kind of how things went, it looks like a straight line if you trace it back, but moving forwards, it wasn't a straight line, and there were a lot of twists and turns and things that I tried and things that I wanted to do, and things just ended up working out, and they'll work out for you guys too.
Oh, well, that's quite the journey. Yeah, hopefully, people could take inspiration from that and explore more to learn about what they like and what they want out of software development. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
Sorry, I
So,
missed the last half of that.
yeah, hopefully it'll help them with their career in software development
Yes, definitely. I hope so.
for sure. So you mentioned that you took a few courses at SFU that really helped you with your co-op. How much did the courses help you land on your first co-op, or was it a lot of self-learning and hackathons or extracurricular projects kind of?
Hmm. For me, it was the hackathons and extracurriculars and pieces like that that really built, the pieces around me that said, hey, I know there's 3,000 students in applied sciences, but I promise I'm different. I promise I can do the job. Please give me a chance, right? So that's kind of the way I thought about it. I was like, I can learn something in these courses, but I need to learn more. I need to build more. I need to show off what different things I can display, right? That being said, the courses really did help when I put my back into it, right? I know courses are really boring. Um, I
Mhm.
know they're very different from real life, and you have a lot of things going on. But sometimes when you hit on a project in a course that is really, really interesting or, could be really cool, um, build the heck out of it, right? Spend a lot of time on it, build it as best as you can, optimize it and build extra features and just go all out and, treat this like a passion project, right? Because the school project is just a starting point, and if you want, you can go really far with it, right? And then that kind of shows your willingness to take something that you're initially very, very new to um, and just run with it, right? Build your own features, come up with things that you want to create. Be a good developer and approach this in a very independent way. Um, so if you find anything in a course, like for example, a group course project that is really cool or could be cool, run with it, see what happens. Um, a lot of the hackathons and personal projects that I did ended up consisting of a lot of my other experience as well. It's a huge, huge investment to go into things like hackathons and try and get something out of it. I know it takes a lot of time and energy, but if it's your thing, again, go for it. There's a lot of ambiguity that you're tackling when you're doing hackathon, and a lot of complex problems that you're building a building solution from the ground up at a hackathon. And again, that's a rare thing that you don't always get. You get the chance to promise something that is technically and physically impossible generally to build, completely impossible to actually put into production. But you can say, hey, this is some cool idea. I thought it would be fun. I built it, this is what it is. And even if you don't end up with a great project that works, you can talk about the ideas, you can talk about the thoughts that you guys came up with, the problems that you want to solve, and why you wanted to solve those social problems, right? And
Mm.
that I think is value in itself. There's significant value in that more than just I've created 100 GitHub commits, this year. Uh, so find what works for you and try different things. I think there's strength in diversity, especially in this job market.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, even nowadays, like hackathons, they really prioritize your thought process and planning and ideas. And although like it would be great if your project worked, but if it doesn't work, the ideas still really play an importance, especially in your own personal journey. So sure,
Definitely.
everyone could. I'm sure hopefully everyone will feel more inspired to join more hackathons.
Yeah, and
So,
and one thing that actually helped me too was going back and looking at my hackathon projects and going, I of course this was a very short-term thing, kind of thought of it on the spot. We needed an idea, we came up with it. Um, but if you start to rebuild that narrative and think about it in a different way, you can look at your project that you built and go, okay, what is this solving? Who am I helping? And what kind of big problem can we really, really make better using this? Right. And if you start to redevelop that story and tone it into different light, right? People start to understand, right? Yeah, everyone understands it's a quick throwaway project, but it can also be something more meaningful at the same time, right? So
yes.
yeah, make use of that.
Okay. So, could you share with us some of the biggest challenges you faced during your co-op application process, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying my struggles, I'm sure, pale in comparison to the work you guys are putting in right now. It's a rough time. It's a rough market. So quality, quantity, a lot of it is very up in the air right now. Um, and I have a lot of sympathy for you guys. What works for me may or may not work for you, right? Um, some of the challenges that I had really were. Um, getting across who I was, right? Reaching that stage of being able to convey why am I different, why am I unique, getting into that application process and doing that blind thing of I don't know if the recruiter will like this and put it onto an interview, right? And just kind of blindly applying and hoping and applying and hoping and it just gets so demoralizing at times, right? Um, at the end of the day, I think morale is almost always one of the greatest challenges, second to actually, the grind of the job process, right? Um, there's a lot of value for me in trying different things, in talking to different people, in reaching out to designers, developers, seniors, managers, and friends, and people from other schools, and seeing different things, and just kind of absorbing information and making connections, and trying to see what's out there, right? Because if you're staring so hard at your resume that you feel so bad about it, then something's wrong because, you have to have the right kind of mindset going into this saying, I can do this. There's a little bit of change that I need to make in my resume. There's a little bit of experience I can get, and there's a little bit of luck. And if all that lines up, I can get that internship. I can get that full time, right? Um, so it really is just kind of like taking a step back and reassessing when you feel bad about things and trying to make sure that you're in the right mindset and approaching things correctly. And there is no correct way, right? It's just trying a lot of different things. One thing I want to talk about, I know it was a couple of years ago. I was applying for no, a recruiter reached out to me about a Microsoft internship. Um, I believe this was in 2017 or so, um, 2017, 2018. And they, put me on for the program manager internship. And they did an interview and they were like, we really like you, we'll fly you out to Redmond, the Microsoft headquarters, and say, we're going to do a four-round interview with you like we do for everyone. Um, and I was so excited. I talked to everyone that I knew. I was like, how do I do this manager interview? What do I need to do and all these kind of things. And I prepped and I got there and I failed all four interviews horribly. I sat there and I just could not answer the questions. I prepared the wrong things and I did not have the right mindset and didn't understand the prioritizations. And I messaged the recruiter afterwards. I was like, hey, so sorry. I know I didn't do as well as I could have, but I thank you for your time. And she ignored me completely. And so for some time, I was like, this was my one chance. I'm never going to get this chance ever again. I screwed it up. I'm terrible at LeetCode. I can't do any of this. I suck. Um, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of reflection and it took a lot of practice for me to get back on my feet and go, okay, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to get my resume in order. I'm going to get my cover letter in order. I'm going to reach out to the right people this time. I'm going to reach out to people who have done that interview and not people who kind of know about the position. I'm going to, prepare correctly and I'm going to take care of myself while I'm doing this process, right? Um, and that worked. And it's worked every single time since. Um, a hard lesson I've had to learn. And I think eventually everyone has to learn it. But that's one of the biggest challenges that I had.
Oh, that was very, very deep and insightful. Thank you for sharing that. And I couldn't agree more. Like it's really like the mentality and like, you just got to keep trying things and fail and not give up. I think that is like really the key to really getting to be able to land on these different experiences. So
Definitely. I think even as a intermediate developer, you get so much imposter syndrome. For example, you're debugging code and you don't understand it and you have this complex problem, or maybe the problem isn't even that difficult, but you're constantly asking for help, you're struggling, you're taking more time than you need. Um, and then you're like, I'm horrible. They should just fire me. Um, and then you talk to seniors, you talk to people who have been in your position, and they're like, "Yep, nope, same thing happened to me. It's just, it is what it is. Everyone has to go through this, and it sucks, and you feel like you don't know anything. You feel like you're doing the wrong thing, and you're not adequate, and um, but everyone goes through that. The difference between someone who, you know, succeeds generally in someone who hasn't succeeded yet is that the person who has succeeded has to go through that failure, right? And they've come out on the other side humbled and been like, I know what it took to get there, and I know that I have to fail again and again and again to succeed just that one time. But when you do succeed, it's all worth it, right?
Yes, for sure. Um, so one thing I think a lot of co-ops would be very curious is I'm sure a lot of them are still in the process of like exploring what they like, whether front end, back end, and a lot of these questions and curiosities. Would you say that by now you have kind of figured out a bit of what you the role you like to do and like the company you're working at, like you're very sure this is really the place and the role you're at is just very you're very certain with that, or are you still in the process of exploring interests that you haven't explored? Things
I'm
like
Yeah, I'm definitely still in the process of exploring, and sometimes I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. I think I could do this. I think I can make this a career, and then everything changes, and you're like, I guess not. Maybe I don't like this anymore, or maybe I can't work on this for the time being. Um, and you know, I reached out to a principal engineer at Amazon when I was there, um, and one of the questions I asked him was that I was being asked to change teams along with a large number of my coworkers without being given a choice, right? It was just this is the way that the organization is happening. You're now working on this. And I talked to him. I was like, what's the best thing I can do? I'm feeling very, out of sorts. Um, how do I approach this? And he said, again, yeah, happened to me. I've learned the most things every time I've been forced out of my comfortable position to try something different. And I thought I was going to be working on this one thing. I thought I liked it. But when I tried something different, it gave me a new perspective. I learned new things. I got better at the new thing or the old thing that I know about. And you have a lot of choice. Anytime you want to switch teams or you want to switch companies, everyone in tech has a lot of ability to do that, right? Um, so I'd like to say I know what I'm doing. I'd like to say that, I'm on the right track. Truthfully speaking, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if I ever will be. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I love that mindset. Life is always a question, and we're always searching to answer that question. And it's okay to not have that question answered. It's very deep. Yes.
Absolutely. I've had more questions than answers.
I think that's a good thing. Keep that in mind, everyone. Yes. So I'm sure that lots of co-op students, they're also in the process of perhaps building their personal projects, wanting to put them on the resume and, sending those resume out there. How would one really determine if they really need to just work on better personal projects or to work on existing projects versus, oh, maybe they just didn't market themselves that well, or they didn't really present themselves that well during the interview or the resume. So, yeah, how do you balance between needing to better market yourself versus actually better work more on the technical projects?
Yeah, and it's a very good question, and it's a very hard question. I think it's the easy answer is to say it depends on you, but you also have to do a lot of reflection, right?
Mhm.
Um, you, on one hand, you have to think about the things that you've done, how they're relevant, if they're relevant, and, how you stack up to, um, okay, I'll put it this way. You can always improve. And I say that about myself as well, right? You can always improve. You can always have a better resume. You can always market yourself better. You can always have more technical experience. Um, but it takes a bit of reflection because, for example, if you're looking at job descriptions and you're consistently applying the things that, don't have the technologies that and you've never really gotten to that stage where you're like, okay, I think I could potentially, be a good candidate for this. If you're not really feeling that about most job applications, then you might need to retune your skills, make sure you have the right projects on your resume that are relevant to a larger amount of job applications, right? So that's number one. Um, and then number two, there's always, the spray and pray approach of sending out resumes and going, I'm gonna hope something works, and I'm not really gonna fine tune it. And if that works for you, it works for you. But if it doesn't work for you, you gotta stop. You gotta stop and think about it, right? If you're sending out 20, 50, 100 applications and you're not getting interviews, then something is wrong with your resume. It's not that your lead code sucks. Maybe it does, maybe it's great, but you got to go back and fix your resume, fix your cover letter, whatever it is in your application that's not making it to the interview stage, right? Um, and it's hard to look at your resume and go, this is good enough or this is not good enough. So I had to suck out my pride. I had to go around to software developers, my friends, designers, a lot of different people, and just go, this is what I have. Is this good enough? This is what I'm applying for. What am I missing? Am I ready for this? Does this look right? Is this readable? What do I need to change? Right. And it was very scary taking what is effectively a professional reflection of you and giving it to someone and being like tear it apart, right? But that does help because you get another perspective from someone who cares about you and wants to help and wants you to improve, right? um, and you need those third party perspectives to understand, what does my resume actually look like? What are people getting out of it? Because what you see from it is not necessarily what other people see from it, right? um,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I definitely think really it's about networking and asking professionals for help. I think that's like the best way to really reflect and assess what you need to improve on. So that's a very good point, Jeffrey. I'm happy you mentioned that. And I think it's really important. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think at the end of it, the way I approach these things is a cycle, right? You can't spend, you shouldn't spend all your time on, say, LeetCode or building projects, and not working on the resume or not working on other things, right? You have to apply a little bit, build a little bit, revise a little bit, get a little bit of feedback, network a bit, learn a bit, and just continually do different things so that you're continually iterating and improving, right? And it's this constant piece of improvement, right? Your resume is never done. Your skill set is never done. And you have to continue building towards that over and over and over again. And that's not saying that there's anything wrong with you. It's just saying that, you know, we all have to continually learn and grow. And both our resumes and our skills are a reflection of that, right?
Yeah, yes, for sure. We have to accept constructive criticisms, and that's the only way for us to become better versions of ourselves. Yeah, for
Definitely.
sure. Well, this is very, very wise words of wisdom, I would say. Okay. And for our next question, how did you leverage your past work experiences to secure your position at Meta?
Mhm. So, okay, here's the way I think of it, right? Um, you always tailor your application, or at least I do, tailor my application to the company I'm applying in. This can be 10 minutes, this can be 30 minutes, right? Not too long. But I look at the company and I go, what do they value? What kind of person do they want? What kind of developer do they care about? Um, and sometimes that's hard. That's very hard when, let's say, a Meta, I'm the position I'm in could be literally anywhere across the entire company, could be anywhere across North America, right? Um, and so I leveraged my experiences by one, kind of reflecting that general experience and making it seem like, I have a little bit of agile, I have a little bit of, experience in C++, I have a little bit of data engineering, and I'm very capable in a lot of different things at a very shallow level, right? So I approached it as a generalist to say, please hire me, I can do anything, right? That's the kind of like idea I wanted to give off, right? Um, and then, um, I took some of those projects and I kind of eased out the aspects that were large scale, right? The aspects that are really, really customer focused or large impact and said, you know, I worked on things that affected this many customers. I worked on things that, made the customer experience a lot better because of this thing, right? Things that are easily relatable to a recruiter that they can understand to say, this person has high impact. This person builds things that are important, right? So to think about your past experiences and projects and tease out those things, um, to convey these important pieces to the recruiter, that's hard and that takes time. Um, but it really, really helps the recruiter to understand what's going on in your experience, right? Um, and I think the third thing, which is less to do with experiences, but more to do with, just how I approach it is I reached out to some friends, and if I didn't have any friends, I would just, message people on LinkedIn, second or third connections and say, hi, I'm applying for this position at X company. I'm really interested in learning about your experience there. Can we chat? Right. And then I kind of ask about their experience, their team, their project, what the company values, all these different little things, right? Um, get to know them and their experience at the company. And if you do one or two of these, you'll start to understand what kind of person the company wants and why they want that person, right? So again, you can tailor your application and tailor your interviews towards this sort of direction. Um, very general, I know, but that's the kind of approach I take towards all of my applications.
No, I like that. That was very insightful, like reflecting on your experiences and skills and reaching out to people who work there to have a better understanding of what it's like. Yeah, and it also could make you reflect on whether you even want to work there, right? So that's
Definitely.
good, really good.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
So early you've mentioned how hackathons and extracurriculars really helped you with your first co-op. What about now? Do you still participate in any hackathons or any external projects outside of work?
I wish I did. I want to. I haven't gone there yet. Um, I think I'm in a very, very strong state of flux right now. A lot of transition pieces. But as
Mhm.
soon as things settle, I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to start hacking things. I'm going to start building projects and, you know, uh, trying out large language models or what other, cool tech is available these days. There's always value in growing outside of your job, right? If you love programming, if you love building things, take that time and explore and meet new people and build new things and get inspired and inspire yourself, right? And if, you don't like doing that in your spare time, totally fair. At the end of the day, it is sometimes just a job, right? Um, but if you have that interest, chase it. There's conferences, there's talks, there's events, there's meetups, there's hackathons, there's so many different things, not just in Vancouver, but all around the world, that you should try and leverage as much as you can. And it makes you a better applicant, it makes you a better person, it makes you better networked, and all these different kinds of things. Um, and it's just fun, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I guess products you work on for work is they're already a handful, or but obviously there's nothing wrong with always trying more, I guess. So
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely, definitely.
Yes. And did you do any lead code practice? And if so, how did you schedule yourself for lead code and when did you start?
Yeah. Don't take my don't follow my lead. I did lead code. I didn't do lead code until my last year of school, and I very much regret it. I
Oh,
knew I hated it. I always knew that it was the least favorite thing, the least fun thing to do in this whole tech application process. And um, I just hated it. I just hate, sitting down and doing these questions and, doing the formula and, having to demonstrate to someone that, yes, I can code. I have coded before. I know what the API for concatenating a string is, like whatever. Um, but it's a necessary part of the job application process, and I accept that. Um, and so I do it.
mhm.
I did a lot of grinding of leak code for Amazon, and then I did it again for Meta. Um, the strategy that I personally use is generally to um, meet with a friend who also needs it. Generally, you or they or both are looking for a job. Um, And you want to be doing lead code once a week, right? You don't want to be doing it every day. You're going to burn out. Even if you love it, you're going to burn out and you're going to stop doing it after a couple weeks, right? So
Mhm.
you do it once a week, weekday evening. You're like 8 p.m. We're going to jump online and we're going to do one lead code question each, right? If you're feeling up to it, do a medium. If you're not feeling, just do a simple, easy, um, or just help your friend do it, right? Kind of guide them and look at the solution and kind of like puzzle things out and learn that way, right? Um, and what this gives you is consistency, right? You might not be prepared necessarily for dynamic programming questions, um, but you'll be very, very smooth at doing lead code questions. You won't be scary to get back into it. You'll have a breadth of experience and you'll be able to recognize patterns more easily. And that anxiety, that panic that usually comes on when you're approaching a new question, it doesn't happen as much and it doesn't happen as strongly, right? Um, so that's my kind of approach to doing these questions and to getting better at lead code. Of course, when you get an interview, hunker down, work hard, grind that lead code, figure out what they want, and do those questions. But until then, take it easy, but do lead code. It's very important. Start as early as you can. Just make sure you're consistent about it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Consistency and to not burn yourself out. I think that's very important. And yeah, people should definitely try a schedule that really works well for them while being able to learn as much as they could.
Yeah, I think everyone has to kind of figure out what is the best way that works for you, right? Some people might say, I do it best alone. I do it best with a certain sort of music, or I do it best on a physical whiteboard. Um, Whatever you have to do to get you doing lead code, do it. Buy the whiteboard, buy the book, schedule the time with friends, meet in person. Whatever you have to do it because this is really important and we got to do it, unfortunately. Um,
Mhm.
but it'll pay off. I promise you it'll pay off.
Well, thank you for that. This is very helpful. And hope- yeah, hopefully everyone could get started on LeetCode sooner or later. Yes. So yeah, would you like to share with the audience one easy LeetCode question to explain your thought process?
Sure, sounds good. Mektim, I will take over the screen. Thank you. All right, can you guys see this? Hold up. All right, Julie, can you see this?
I can see it, yes.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Is it a
So,
little cropped in, or is that just me?
what's going on? What's wrong with the screen share? Can you see it okay?
I can see the VS Code.
Okay, cool. Interrupt me if there's any technical problems. I know it's Zoom. It is what it is. Um, okay, so I'm going to be going through a quick LeetCode question. Um, I'm going to do it in the way that I do interview questions. Um, because when you're lead coding, what you're doing is you're prepping for the interview, right? You're not always trying to figure out how to do dynamic programming. You know, sometimes you're just practicing for the interview. And I have a very specific structure that I'll share with you afterwards, and I'm going to go through it step by step, right? Um, so the usual approach that, people do when they start out doing lead code is to say, this is the question, I'm going to do it, I'm going to code it, and it's going to work, right? And if it doesn't work, I'm going to fix it, right? That works in the LeetCode browser. That doesn't work when you're doing it in an interview setting, right? In an interview setting, what the interviewer really wants to see is, can you convey what you're talking about correctly? Can you, talk about the different trade-offs? Can you analyze the time and space complexity? How do you approach these things effectively and efficiently, right? And there's a lot of different, there's no right answer to any of these things, but they want to see the approach, and I'm going to show you step by step what kind of approach I take. Right? Okay, so this is a LeetCode easy question, valid palindrome. A phrase is a palindrome if, after converting all uppercase letters into lowercase letters and removing all non-alphanumeric characters, It reads the same forward and backwards. Alphanumeric is letter or number. Given a string S, return true if it's a palindrome or false if it's not a palindrome. Okay, so if I'm given this, some people start coding. Don't start coding. Coding is not the most important thing in a coding interview. I've passed coding interviews without doing coding. All right. How are we going to start? We're going to start by understanding the question, because if you don't understand the question, you're going to make a mistake. And so I'm going to be asking myself, unfortunately, because I don't have an interviewer, right? I'm going to be saying, okay, palindrome. Okay, so it's a string. I'm going to be passing in a single string, nothing else, right? Um, numeric. Let's say I didn't have this line here, then I'd be asking, what is, just to double check, alphanumeric is letters, numbers. What do I do with the other characters, right? Um, do I ignore the other characters? Do I throw an error? And they go, okay, ignore the characters, right? Um, I say, is there a maximum length on the palindrome? Do I have to worry about that? Capacity, space-wise. They're like, no, we don't have to worry about it. Okay. So now I double check. Once I feel like I kind of understand the question, I usually rephrase it, right? I rephrase it in a way that is um, human speak, not code speak. So I go, okay, so given a set of characters in a row, remove all those non-alphanumeric characters, convert it all to lowercase, and then make sure that it's the same forwards and backwards. Does that make sense? And they say yes. Okay, you've understood the question. Let's go. So what's the input? Input is a string. Output Boolean, right? This is really important. I always write it out because sometimes they say, oh, you need to return, the string if it's a palindrome, where you need to return something. Be very clear about what your input and output is, right? Um, okay, so now that I've understood the question, I've asked all my questions that I can think of. Um, I'm gonna do this brute force. I'm gonna do this the absolute slowest way possible. So here's how it's gonna work. I'm going to convert string to lowercase. I'm going to remove all non-alphanumeric characters from the string. And okay, so now I have a string, right? Um, you need to check if it's the same forwards and backwards. How do I do that? I guess I could reverse the string. Forwards, backwards. I can reverse the string, and then I can loop through the string twice, the reverse string and the normal string from left to right, and make sure that all characters are the same, right? Now, we can all kind of tell, hopefully, that this is not the most efficient way. But what I do is I start off and I say this is the brute force solution. I acknowledge that. Let's see what we can do to make it better, right? Because um, this is the number one step. You take the question and you get a solution that works. You don't immediately jump to the fastest solution, even if you know the solution, even if you know what the fastest solution is. The idea is to take a brute force solution and show why it's slow, why you can optimize it and how, right? So I say, this is brute force. Let's see if we can do better. Okay, so what's our space and time complexity? I'm going to quickly summarize it. This is ON, because I have to loop through it once. This is O of N. I have to loop through it again. In fact, I might have to copy the string, but let's pretend I don't have to. I'm going to reverse the string. That means ON space and time, right? These are just time. And compare the two strings, ON again, right? So time-wise, honestly, not too bad, but space-wise could be better. And there are definitely optimizations that we can do here, right? So, okay. Um, what are we going to do here? Once we know that this is brute force and that this isn't the best solution, we're going to go, okay, what's a bottleneck? Maybe you can identify the biggest bottleneck sometimes, so you can see, okay, we're already, you know, taking a lot of space here. Can we remove that, right? Sometimes you can, and you just kind of start anywhere and you go, where are we doing a lot of work? So, okay, we know we're storing the extra string. Can we avoid using that extra space? Can we not store, that string? So maybe instead of reversing the string, what we can do is check the first and the last characters and then we move inwards using 2 pointers, right? So we kind of start at each end and then we go and compare each one inwards, right? Um, so that makes sense. Um, ON time, right? Because you're still looping through the string, but now we're not using any space. So this looks like the first and last characters, then move inwards. Oh, and time now. So we can eliminate that. Great. Okay. Um, let's keep thinking. Do we have to do all these steps? Do we have to convert the string to lowercase? Talk through it. Talk through if each step is actually important or if you can mix it in with another step or do it in a different way, right? Do I have to convert the string to lowercase? Not really, because what I can do is I can kind of do that while I check the characters, right? I can convert them on the spot. That way I don't have to do another loop, right? Um, Technically it's ON as well, but we are saving an extra loop of time, right? Um, so while it's not an order of magnitude, it is faster, right? So let's say lowercase them, right? Okay. And what else do we do? We remove all the non-alphanumeric characters, ON, right? Um, and we remove that. Okay. Instead of removing them, we can kind of just skip them. We can leave them there and we don't need to do anything with them. So if we're checking the first and last characters and we're moving inwards and one of them is non-alphanumeric, let's say it's a dollar sign, we can just skip that and keep going, right? Because we just ignore it. So we don't have to remove it, right? So if character is non-alphanumeric, skip this character. Okay, cool. So now that I've done some optimizations, maybe one, maybe a lot, maybe I've rewritten the whole thing using different data structures. Um, I want to go, okay, it's no longer brute force. What's my space-time complexity, right? My space complexity is O1, right? Because now I'm just using space complexity O1 because I'm not using any extra space other than 2 pointers, right? And then the time complexity is going to be O of n, right? Okay, can we make this faster? Can we speed up the time complexity more? Not really. We kind of still, regardless of what we have to do, we have to go through the string at least once, right? We can't avoid doing that. Um, so how I approach this, I say, this is the best conceivable time that I can come up with at the moment. This is the fastest space and time complexity for the solution. Um, and so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a couple examples, right? So sometimes the algorithm is kind of complex. You have some pointers, you have something you're saving, you have a hash table, you have, arrays moving back and forth, and it's a bunch of different steps. So it's good to go, okay, if I create a thing, and if I create an example and I run through it, doesn't make sense, right? Um, I start with a small one, just one, and then we go, something like that. Run through it very quickly, spend like 20 seconds each example, right? And here's the cool thing. If you've missed a case, if you've gotten the algorithm wrong sometimes, the interviewer will give you an example. While you're doing examples, they'll say, how about you try this one, right? And then as you run through it, you'll go, I missed something. I didn't understand it. I've done the question wrong, or, I missed an edge case and there's something I need to think about, right? The interviewer wants you to succeed. No interviewer wants to sit there and watch us fail through a question. They want us to succeed, right? So if you start doing examples, they can prompt you into doing an example that'll help you improve your solution, right? So you do one or two solutions. And then if you've talked through all this properly, the interviewer is going to say, okay, let's code, right? You don't even have to say it. You don't even have to go to it. The interviewer will say, that's good enough. Let's start coding, right? Because they know that you've got a good enough solution. They know that your algorithm is close enough and correct enough, right? So once they prompt you, go for it, right? How much time have I spent? I think I've spent what, 10 minutes, just 10 minutes coming up with a solution and algorithm and optimizing it and reanalyzing space-time complexity and testing it out and all these different things, right? Coding should be a very small portion, right? For a 25, for let's say sometimes I do 20-minute questions for an interview. 15 minutes of that is spent coming up with the algorithm. 5 minutes is spent coding and testing, right? So focus on this approach. Focus on talking it out and thinking about the algorithm, right? Okay, so how am I going to code it? I'm going to check the first and last characters, right? So create 2 pointers. Ah, wait, I've forgotten. So I wrote down my input and output, right? So let's start out making that function, right? Um, Boolean, I'm using Java, by the way, but you can use whatever language you like. Valid palindrome input is a string. And if this is incorrect, they'll correct you, right? They'll see that and go, are you sure about that? So, double check this, start out with that, and then make sure it's okay. Create 2 pointers. Okay. And then we're going to move inwards. Um, what is this going to look like? So we're going to start 1 pointer on the left side, right? So it's going to look like this, A, B. We're going to start 1 pointer here. I'm going to start 1 pointer here. Left equals 0. The right equals s dot length minus 1, right? So we're going to start our indices here, right? And now we're going to loop through and move inwards. And what is that going to look like? Let's do a while loop. Let's say while left is less than right. Because once left equals right, if left passes right, then we've already checked the entire string, right? Because we're moving towards each other. What about if left equals right? Well, they're the same character. And if they're the same character, then we're good. It's a palindrome, right? We don't have to worry about it, right? One single character is fine. So while left is less than right, we're going to say, okay, what's that left character there? Equals s dot car at left, right? Car right character is whatever character is at that index, right? And then, okay, let's start and figure out how it's non-alphanumeric. Okay. So here's a question for you. Um, Julie, what do you think you do when you don't know an API? Let's say I don't know how to check if a character is alphanumeric or not.
Yeah,
No wrong
sorry.
answer. So let's say I'm trying to figure out if a character is alphanumeric or not in my LeetCode solution. And
Right.
I forget the solution. I forget the API. What should I do?
Oh,
What would you do?
Um, maybe you could try to come up with one, or maybe you could tell the interviewer that um, the API that you want to use and you just kind of forgotten about it. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Both of those are great answers. So depending on how I feel, I'll go with either one. Usually, for example, if I go with the second one, I'll be like, hey, I know there's a library to check it. I've forgotten what it is. Do you want me to use, a specific function? These days, in fact, sometimes I'll just kind of say, um, actually, sorry, if they're giving you lots of advice and they're really helping you with it, then I'll kind of ask for that API and go, what kind of function should I use? I don't remember the syntax, right? Everyone forgets syntax. That's just how it is. That's why you got to compile code and it fails. That's it. But if I'm being very independent and they haven't really chipped in with a lot of suggestions, instead, what I'm going to say is I'm going to just assume that this is the API. I don't remember the exact one, but I'm going to pretend it is, right? And most of the time, they're just going to let you get away with it, right? So I'm just going to say left character is digit. And this is
Mhm.
not the correct syntax, but they'll let you go ahead with it because they don't care about if you can memorize the syntax, right? What they care about is, can you talk through the solution? Can you come up with these things? Anyone can Google an API, but not everyone, not all the candidates can convey their solution clearly, right? So if the character is alphanumeric, I want to skip the character. And I got to do this for the right one too. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. Let's get back up to the loop. Right character dot is digit and right character dot is letters. Right minus minus, continue. So we're continually moving inwards. Right. So now we're going to think about lowercasing them. Um, if left char dot lower, again, not the correct API, but we're going to go with it, and they're going to say, yes, that's fine. Right char dot lower, false. Yeah, because if the right character and left character don't match, then it's not a palindrome, right? Um, and so what do we want to do now? We're done, right? Where's our return function? We got to return true, right? Okay. And you're like, you're done. Great, done. But you're not done. You got to run through an example because you did run through an example with your algorithm, but you haven't run through it with your code. So if I ran through it with my code, if I ran through my code with an example, let's say ABA, what I'd find is that my while loop never terminates because I never move them inwards if the characters match. So I have to go left plus plus, right minus minus, right? So again, this is why you have to do examples. And if you don't do it, sometimes the interviewer will make you do it, or they'll call you out on it. They say, that's not correct. Double check your answer. Um, so, run through it, double check, think about your edge cases, think about what you're doing, and reflect on it, right? Now, how long did that take to code? That took, I think, 5 minutes, but mostly because I was talking through it. Right? A solution should not be complex or long. The interviewer does not have the time to watch you code through 200 lines of code and rebuild it and refactor and whatever, right? Get the solution, get the basic pieces that you have to do, understand it, make sure that it's optimal, and then code it, right? And once you're done, you're done, right? Check the examples, check the edge cases, and then you're confident that your solution is good. You've started out with a question you didn't understand. You've built a boot for a solution. You've optimized it. You've understood the time space complexity. You've coded it and you've tested it, right? And if you do all this, um, the interviewer will help you with this. They'll understand that you're on the right track. And this will look like a valid solution. Right? I think that's
Wow.
about it. Yeah. I didn't plan out the end of this. Julia, I hand it back to you.
No worries. No, thank you so much for giving us a demo. That was very insightful. And yeah, like really the planning stages and sharing your thought process. It's really the most important, I think. And then it's the coding. The coding kind of happens at the end. So that's very cool to know. And yeah, it was very helpful.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, everyone has their own approach, right? Some people are going to be like, I'm going to not do this part. I'm going to move it somewhere else. I'm going to test at a different phase or a different way. Um, but it's important to find what works for you, and it's important to find a method. If you don't have a method of doing this, you'll just be coding blindly with no understanding of the solution, no understanding of, what kind of answer they want. Um, and you fail the interview because you're not communicating the right things. Even if you communicate the correct solution, you may not be answering the technical interview question, right? So it's something
mhm,
that I urge you guys to reflect on, build your own process, figure out what works for you. Um, and over time, as you do this, it'll get natural and you can just carry this off in an interview and LeetCode becomes way easier, I promise.
mhm. Yes, yes. When you did the planning at the beginning, I know some people they like to do the planning, then they as they code, they share their basically their steps and their thoughts. Or did you for what you did, like would you recommend doing that? Or as you're planning, you're just talking to the interviewer about like this process without coding at all.
Yeah, again, I think it go by feel, right? I try in all my practices, I'm not panicked. So I'll write out all those comments, right? I'll write out the algorithm step by step and I'll revise it as I go there. But as soon as I get to the interview, sometimes I'm really nervous and I just can't type and talk at the same time, right? And if
Mm,
you feel like you're pressed for time, then you don't have to type, right?
mm,
Sorry, you can just go through that question, talk through it. And if there's something important that you really have to write down, write it down. But if your hands are getting in the way, let your voice talk, right? Um, on the other hand, if you do have some comments and documentation here, that becomes your documented code, right? Now you've auto-documented your code, even though I didn't write a single comment as I was coding, right? I already had those comments here, right? And this just makes it look a lot better to the interviewer, right? So there's pros and cons, whatever works for you. Um, yeah.
mm. Okay, yeah, depends on personal preference, but yeah, always good to have like some sort of outline before one starts coding. That's very
Yes,
good.
definitely.
And just very briefly, what are just some general common mistakes you see people make during lead code?
Yeah. Jumping straight to the efficient solution, like I mentioned, is one of the biggest ones because, um, sometimes you can just go, "This is the fastest solution," and the interviewer is going to go, "Why? Why is it the fastest solution?" And you can't explain it, and you're just saying, "Well, it's fast. It's not using a lot of space." Um, but they want to have you talk about the trade-offs. Sometimes for a solution, they want to hear you say, what if I used an array? What if I used a hash map? What if I used a heap? Like what kind of solution might be good here? And, w- you know, could I use a heap? Maybe I could. And I could, but it's not efficient. They want to hear you talk through this and think about the trade-offs, right? Um, the they understand that the process is not directly to optimize solution when you're actually coding, and that's the way it should be in the interview as well. Another another thing I know people don't always do is think about the space and time complexity early enough, or think about it in terms of like the entire solution, where to break it down. Um, Sometimes some solutions are pretty simple by, just tweaking one single thing and saying, I'm going to replace this complex processing with a data structure, right? Something like that, or an algorithm. But if you have a lot of different pieces in your algorithm, it's hard to point out exactly where that load is happening, what is the bottleneck that needs to be optimized, right? So if you talk through your algorithm line by line and you go, this is O(n), this is O(n) squared, this is O(1), then you get an intuitive sense of this is causing problems. This is something that we need to stop and take a look at. And this is the first thing that I should do, not optimize the O(n) loop that is completely useless, right? And in our case, I jumped straight to optimizing space complexity because that was O(n). And if I optimized for time complexity, we also had other places that were O(n), right? So with one step, I optimized the space complexity directly to O(1), right? Um, Again, whatever works for you, but reflect on your approach to these questions and figure out how to make it um, effective, efficient, and still conveying the information that you need.
Mm, okay. Oh, thank you so much for your amazing presentation, Jeffrey. Yeah, and you've provided so many useful tips that others will surely appreciate, and I'm sure everyone found your journey very inspiring. Now we'll be moving on to the Q&A section. So I'll be asking the questions that you all have prepared for Jeffrey. For those who want to unmute yourselves and ask him live, please comment that in the Q&A section that you want to speak to him. I'll call on you when it's your turn.
I
Okay,
almost
so
forgot to
let
share,
me.
sorry. I also have the technical interview structure. I'll share
Oh, right, right. Oh,
this.
yes. No, yes,
I
for sure. You
really
can
forgot this. Yes.
please feel free to share first.
Yes. Can you guys see that? Can you see the sunscreen? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the steps that I did earlier, just written down. So if you want to take a picture of this, follow it, change it up for whatever works for you. Um, if you need it, I think we can send it out, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. But this is the structure that I use and I've memorized. Um, for my process. Sorry, Julie, go ahead for the questions.
No worries, no worries. Okay, let's see. So,
We can also send an email out right after this seminar and we'll share this whole document. I think it'll be helpful.
Excellent, thank you.
okay, so first question, this is by Soren Zhao. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. The question is, what stood out to the Meta recruiter the most when you got hired as a developer?
That's a great question. And I'm going to say, I don't know. You know what? I should have asked the recruiter. I should have gone back and asked, you know. I think a couple of things. One, I mentioned customer impact before. Um, so one thing, okay. So the way that I approach looking at a resume is, I think a recruiter has 5 seconds, maybe 10 at best, to go through this resume. Why? Because they have hundreds of resumes that are flooding in every day, right? And what sets you apart? What makes you look on your resume like you're capable to do this position, right? Um, and they have to get that in 5 seconds, right? Um, so talking about things like Kubernetes, if you know the job description says deployments and AWS, you know, if I talk about Kubernetes, the recruiter has a hard time linking that. The recruiter has a hard time understanding what that is. If I say I optimized a lot of things and blah 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 and made things, you know, blah blah blah, they don't necessarily understand that. What a non-technical recruiter understands, or a technical recruiter even, is business impact, right? What kind of things you built that helped people? How did the feature that you built, um, how did the feature that you worked on affect the end customer? Does it make a better customer experience? Does it speed up loading times by 10%? You know, how many devices was it pushed out to? All these different things, you know, like how many things are we monitoring? And if we monitor things, what are we enabling, right? What are we enabling our company and our product to do, right? All these different things you have to think about your feature in a larger sense and say, okay, what is the business impact? What is important and relatable to someone who doesn't know that much about tech necessarily? Um, and how do I make my resume convey those points? So personally, I think that's one of the strongest points of my resume. That helps a recruiter understand that this person is technical, yes, but they're also technical in one, the correct ways, and two, they build relevant things, right? Um, that's what I would say.
Oh, great.
Right.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you. Yeah.
Would you say that about cover letters as well? Just talk about the impact in plain English.
Sure, and I'll let Julie go through the Q&A after this as well. But I think cover letter very similar, right? You also want to be talking about business impact when possible, but also you want to be selling yourself. So it's a weird sort of situation. Um, all I'll say about cover letter is just do your best. No one has a good cover letter out here. We all suck. We're in tech. It's fake. It's screwy. It's not good. It's not. It's never going to come across as natural. Um, so do your best, but don't spend that much time. You know, focus on the resume and make that strong.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Julie, go ahead.
Okay, so our next question is, so this is from Sri. So his comment was, so you mentioned that you reached out to others at the company you're applying to. How did you reach out to these people? You can also mention like any suggestions for reaching out, like cold connections, people you don't know, things like that.
Yeah. Um, Number one, right? You know, reach out to friends wherever you can, um, or friends of friends when you know them, and just say, hey, I am interested in working at this company. I want to apply. Can we talk a bit about your team? Can we talk a bit about the things you're working on, your experience at that, you know? And I'll probably come back to that conversation later. But if if you have none of that, which is fine, that's just kind of how it works. Everyone's moving around all the time. Um, I'll reach out to someone who was in my position, right? For example, if I worked at Amazon and I want to go to Meta, I'm going to reach out to a software developer who's my level, let's say intermediate, ideally worked at a large company, um, recently, before Meta, uh, and try and tease that out of them because then you look a bit more relatable, right? They their experience is closer to what you're looking for. And you want to know, what is the company like for you now? How much do you enjoy it? What is the recruiting process like? Um, and they might have some, not only do they potentially respond better, right? They might accept a connection request more likely because you're in a similar situation, but they'll have more relatable insights, right? And if all else fails, um, I used to take my blurb and say, "Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm applying for this thing. Here's like 2 lines about me background, and I have 10 minutes for coffee chat to learn about you or your team or your project." And I search up X, let's say company software developer, and I send it to the first 20 people on the list, right? 19 of them would ignore me, but I'd get one response, and that's all you need, right? Um, so do whatever you have to, right? It's tough. It's not easy. Networking is unpleasant, I know, especially in tech. But there are ways to get the information you need, and you almost always have to network to get it, right?
Yeah, I definitely think it really depends on just if you reach more number of people, then your luck of getting a response increases. So it's really just a numbers thing, I think.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
I
what about
think, sorry, one more thing I just thought
sorry.
about. It's really important to be upfront with your ask, right? To send in that LinkedIn message what you want, sorry. If you don't, or if you send a generic connection request without a message, they have no reason to accept it, right? You're just another number. Be upfront and say, "This is what I'm looking for. Can you please help me?" And a lot of the time, people will be sympathetic and help. Sorry, Julie, go ahead.
Somebody also this was like yeah, again by Soren Zhao. His question was like if one should reach out to the employer and if there's a way to approach them, kind of. Is that possible? Usually not recommended.
Unless it's a startup, these days, no. It used to be that you could maybe reach out to a recruiter or someone that, in that company could reach out to a recruiter and get that connection, and put in the resume. Um, These days, not at all, unfortunately. Recruiters are swamped and there's too few people working at the company that are able to help you and too many people interested. So there's just so much going on that it's not feasible anymore. Um, and it is what it is. Just not worth that avenue anymore. But if things, loosen up a bit, if recruiters start getting, out and about on Twitter and LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff, then it might be a good chance to reach out and say, "Hey, can we chat about the opportunity?" Right?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a question by Kian. His question is, do you have any advice for someone who wants to apply for jobs abroad with intention of yeah, relocating there as well?
Yeah, I'd say don't even think about it. Just apply, treat it like you would a local job. Um, And if they come up with a problem, then deal with it. If they come up with a question, be honest. Say, yes, I need sponsorship for a visa, or yes, I need whatever. Um, be prepared to shoulder that burden of like flying out yourself and relocating for a while. And but aside from that, be honest with your application and just apply. They still look at SFU students all the same as most universities, and they'll still take you. Um, it is a little bit more work for them, but that doesn't mean they'll reject you. They'll go through the process and then they'll figure it out later. So don't self-select, right? Don't self-select for these things. Just go for it. It'll work out. Everything will be okay.
For our next question is by Jerry. His question was, have you experienced burnout or being in a slump with software development or in general? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. Um, Definitely experienced burnout a couple different times. Um, it sounds stupid, but the easiest way to not get into burnout is to not burn out in the first place. It's hard in this industry and in this job market. You're encouraged to push yourself as hard as you can. Um, what I always say is that, if you want to push yourself, work hard, build cool things, um, stay up late, do whatever you have to or what you want to. Um, but always take the time to reflect every month, every week, every year, whatever it is, whatever your time scale is, sit back, give yourself some time, a couple days, a couple weeks, and go, am I doing what's right? Am I doing what's strategic? Am I doing what's smart? Because if you're not doing that, then you need to refocus. And the worst kind of burnout is when you're doing something that you don't like and you're headed in the wrong direction, right? So you need to catch yourself before that happens. But I want to say if you like what you're doing and you can see the end goal and you can see how what you're doing gets you there, then it's very, very hard to burn out. It's very, very hard, right? All it takes is just, you know, passion for what you're doing, and then suddenly you have energy to do more, right? So take care of yourself, physically, mentally, as much as you can take care of yourself. But if you love something, go for it. Just keep yourself in check once in a while, right?
Yes, reminding yourself it's your passion and it's the path you chose for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we have a question by Jamie and Kian. I'll just ask them. They're very similar. So one is, do you think LeetCode hards are necessary? Have you been asked one before? Second, is there a certain level of LeetCode comfortability you should have before applying to jobs, or is it okay to apply and to start LeetCode at the same time?
Yeah. Um, I have never done a lead code hard. I hope I never have to. I probably will eventually, but um, who knows? I don't know. Maybe I won't have to. Maybe I'll leave tech before then. Anyways, no. What I wanted to say was, what kind of lead code ability should you have? You don't need to have any, and I did a number of interviews early on without lead code. Um, they were not the best interviews. They were not the best approach, but I got through them. Um, and again, in this job market, you do what you have to do, right? If you don't have lead code experience, that's okay. Just go for it and see what happens and play by ear. Um, but do start LeetCode. Do start LeetCode whether or not you're applying for jobs now. Get familiar with it. You know, my goal when I'm doing LeetCode outside of, like work, when I'm doing with my friend regularly, is not to get better at it. It's great if I can. It's great if I can get better at threesome and, hash tables and dynamic programming and whatever, but it's not my goal. My goal is to get comfortable with it so I'm not scared, I'm not anxious. I know that if I'm given an easy question, I could probably think through it. Um, and if I get an interview, I can immediately dive in and brush up. I'm not afraid of it, and I can approach it comfortably and without anxiety, right? That's my personal approach to it. Um, whatever works for you.
Thank you. Um, so Nyota Kuwayama, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. The question was to follow up, what should I do when I cannot get a brute force solution?
Something that I tried to do, and I'm still learning to do it right, is most of these leak code questions in an interview is, how do I say this? They're designed to be complex as an algorithm, but they're also designed to be somewhat easily understood if you don't know tech and you lay out, let's say, a deck of playing cards on the table and they're like, sort this in a certain way, right? Or they're like, move these around and do this, right? So if you didn't have a computer, you weren't coding, you just had physical things in front of you, or you were drawing it on a whiteboard, like it would make sense. It's intuitive, right? You want to get to that point where the question is intuitive. And if it's not really intuitive, it doesn't make sense. If you were to do it physically in front of you, then you probably might need to ask more questions and get a better idea and get an example. Can you give an example? I don't quite understand what we're doing here and why we're doing it, right? Um, Once you get to that intuitive answer, the answer that human beings can understand and not necessarily a programmer, um, you want to think about translating that into the brute force. Um, and I know it's a slower process, it's hard to get there, but some of these questions are just a bit more complex and they require a couple more steps. It is what it is. It takes time. If you can't always get the brute force solution, that's okay. Do other questions, come back to it in the future, do easier questions, do similar questions in the same data structure field or whatever. We can't finish all questions. That's just the reality of it. So, don't get stuck on it. But if you can, think of it intuitively and work through that.
For sure, more practice for sure. So Dax wrote, so assuming were you born, so you're Canadian, Jeffrey?
Yes, born and raised in Vancouver.
Canadian.
Yes,
Born and
Canadian.
raised, yes. So when applying to job in the US, did you select the option for required sponsorship to work?
I think so.
Do
I
you
think so.
remember
And
that part?
yes, and I think a lot
Yes.
of some people have asked, do I lie and say, I should, they should I lie and say I don't need sponsorship when actually I do? Um, at the end of the day, the company is going to go through that process. And even if the recruiter is going to figure out that you do or don't have visa sponsorship needs, um, and even if you check no, the recruiter is going to find out either before or after the interviews, and you're going to be kicked from the candidate pool. That's just how it is. So I think the approach that I have is for this one, be honest with it and say, if you need sponsorship, you need sponsorship. Um, be honest about it. And if the recruiter wants you, they'll put in the work, right? They have processes. The recruiter doesn't necessarily have to do anything themselves. They'll just pass you off to the legal team. So, you know, most of the time, why wouldn't the recruiter do it unless they have a business reason not to? And if they have a business reason not to, they're going to stop you anyways, whether or not you tick that box, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Hopefully they have grants or funding.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. John has a question. His question is, so I have 2 co-op experience as a data analyst, but I'm technically doing a comp sci major. After scary guy boom.
Sir, I think my internet's breaking up a bit. Give me a sec. Sorry, everyone. Zoom problems. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I think it's better now, I hope. Um, yes, okay, sorry,
Okay.
could you repeat the question? Yeah, is it
I
fixed now?
think Julie's internet may have cut out.
Oh, okay, so it wasn't me. Oh, okay. Sorry, everyone. Zoom problems, you get how it is. Welcome to the post-pandemic era.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I think she's back.
Okay,
See.
great. And if not, I can go through some questions as well. Mektim, did you remember which question she was going through? Was it? Oh, hello, hello.
He's back.
Muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Hi,
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Was I the only
Cool.
one that disappeared?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Oh,
But
okay.
anyways, we're good. We're all back now.
Okay, we're back. Thankfully, yes.
Okay, let's go with this. I missed the question. Sorry, could you read it again?
Yes, I'll read the question again. So, the question, it's by John. So his question was, I have 2 co-op experience as a data analyst, but I am technically doing a comp sci major. What's your opinion on jumping specialization after, say, a couple of years working? If I want to do software development, the data field looks a little scary and saturated now with the AI boom.
I heard you say in that question after a couple years working, and I want to say that's absolutely the right thing to do. You should spend a couple years working, or sorry, does that mean, do you know if that means jump after working as a data analyst or jump after working as a software engineer?
I think couple of years working as a data
As
analyst.
data analyst. Okay,
He has
okay.
two, yeah, he had two co-op
Got it.
experience as a data analyst.
Got it. Okay. Um, I think that's not a problem. Um, you know, you got to respond to the market. That's how it is. If you don't respond, that's how you get Kobo developers, 50 years after Kobo was invented. Um, you, yeah, go by what feels right. But having a little bit of that work experience under your belt makes it easier to switch fields or switch back if you need to. The more you have, the better cushion you have. The easier it is to pivot and repivot. So, if you're not sure, you can just go with what you have, build that up a little bit, and then pivot. Because it makes it a lot easier as a safety net or as transferable experience, right? Um, if software is something that you love, go for it and spend more time on that outside of work or co-op and kind of build your experience towards it that way while you're still working as data analyst, right? So a lot of different approaches here. Um, but I think go with your gut is the answer again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's do just a few more questions before we end the meeting presentation. So Jerry's question was, during your co-ops, were you able to take on more responsibility and or autonomy compared to a regular co-op? And if so, how did you do that?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do, and I've done this myself, and I've gotten this advice from seniors and other people as well. Um, Take on more responsibility whenever you can, right? As a co-op, you're generally not doing a lot of important things. If you are, great, fine, don't worry about it. But if you aren't, go to your boss and say, I want to be working on this project, or I want to shadow this person, or I want to see these things, or I want to improve these things. Um, Even if they say no, or if there's no opportunity like that, there's always things in the team that you can improve. Sometimes it's onboarding processes, sometimes it's bash script, sometimes it's documentation. Whatever it is, do the grunt work, even if it's not the most fun pieces, right? Because that shows initiative and that gives you other skills than just the coding pieces that you're doing. And it shows the team and the company and the manager that you're willing to be a team player, right? That's really important when they're thinking about what kind of person to select. Let's say to return as a full-time, not do they know the code? Because anyone can learn the code. You can literally teach anyone the code after you hire them, right? But are they a good employee? Are they going to be good with the team? Are they going to be productive? Can they be independent? Can they, do they care about the right things? Um, and working on things like onboarding pieces or bash scripts or deployment improvements, anything like that, really demonstrates that you have commitment towards making this better, right? Um, yeah. So take on more responsibility. If you can't, if you're not given any, find it.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Like, I think employers love it when you're like, I want to take on a bigger role or do more stuff. I'm free. Please let me know. I think, yeah, they'll like you more and maybe give you more benefits. Okay, and from this is by T. His T's question is, what makes a personal project worthy of being a resume point?
When you start out, of course, it's like, oh, any project that you've done, right, it needs to go on there. Um, Once you get a little bit more project experience or hackathons or work or whatever, then you have to start to be more selective. And when that happens, I think the answer is to try and go for more socially impactful projects. This is something I talk about in the context of things like hackathon projects, right? You can build something like um, a Donald Trump AI bot, right? Or you can build something like um, a political compass that reads in news articles and displays what sort of based on the terminology what kind of political sway you think they are and what kind of bias they have, right? One of those is fun. The other is serious and it solves a social issue, right? Social issues like politics, homelessness, healthcare, diversity. All these different things are really important sectors um, that don't have enough people working in them. And if you create or at least come up with an idea for a solution in that sector, then it shows that you have creativity and you care about the right things, right? Anyone can make a linked list project. Not everyone is going to come up with a cool new healthcare app that's going to revolutionize society. And sure, again, you and I are not going to build the next healthcare app that's going to revolutionize society, but coming up with the idea of building the project, being able to talk about the whys and the hows and the different kind of things in this industry and thinking about the importance of this project. That's what stands out to me about personal projects. And that's how to make it useful in a resume.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. We'll do maybe one last question before we end this this fireside chat and co-op session. Ooh, who will be the lucky one here? So in terms of working in Meta, do you find it stressful or yeah, is it friendly? Is it stressful? How do you feel about working in Meta?
I think I'm very lucky to be working in Meta. I don't find it stressful. I find it not relaxing, but challenging in a good way, right? The tooling is there, the teammates are smart and helpful, and they know what they're doing, and it's really fun to see a team that has their head in the right direction. And the challenges that we're working on really are important. I can see the impact that they make and why we do it, why we build it, and kind of like the impacts of that, right? And because of that, I can believe in my work. I can believe in my team. And I'm lucky to be in a place where I can do that. And if you're not in a place where you can do that, you want to continually be working on getting to a place where you can, right? A team that you like, a work environment that you like, and a project that you like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I also, yeah, and you've also mentioned like you worked at SAP and Amazon and now Meta. These are all I think, pretty big, popular companies. Do you think like, yeah, before you worked at SAP, did you ever work at a smaller company? And for people who have worked for smaller companies, like, do you think it would affect their chances of landing into these big companies, or not so much? It's really just about experience.
I personally didn't, but I don't think it affects your chances negatively at all to work in those smaller companies. Different companies and different projects require different challenges. What I think is more important is how you present it, right? Again, what you talk about on the resume, the features and the impacts that it had, and why you built it, and what difference it makes in the world and your users and the product, pieces like that, right? If you can convey those effectively, you can be working for a no-name startup that fails, and you can still have an incredibly impressive resume, right? Incredibly compelling based on not just the company names, but what it says about you as a person and a developer, right?
Okay, well, I think time is up, everyone. We kind of went over time, but that's okay. Yeah, so now this concludes our Q&A session. So thank you all so much for coming. I hope everyone has taken this opportunity to gain valuable insights into the co-op application process, key projects, and LeetCode preparation. So a big thank you to Jeffrey for sharing his experiences and knowledge with us today. Have a great day, everyone, and good luck with your co-op applications.
Thanks, everyone.
Yay! Thank you.
Good luck.